Spoken label. I haven't thought about flying for a long time. I haven't dreamed of that moment when I was alone above the clouds for a long time. I haven't dreamed of waking up in a room surrounded in blue and green grass for more years than I could dream of remembering. I haven't walked back into the past or scratched on the doors of my origins, where it all came from, since I held up that cape for the last time.
Return to Cape Town 10th Year Anniversary Edition is a revised version of Andy N's first poetry book. The book can be purchased from Amazon and it contains numerous additional material.
Spoken Label. Hi, it's Andy N from Spoken Label. Thank you today for streaming or downloading another episode of Spoken Label. Spoken Label was originally set up on beginning of 2016 and as of speaking has currently nearly 300 sessions. The full archive is available on Spoken Label bandcamp.com. Although it is available for free for stream and download if you wish, I am always grateful for any sort of kind of donation to enable me to keep the running costs of this podcast going. And enjoy. Take care. Bye bye. Spoken Label.
Hi guys, Andy N, Spoken Label, back in the house on a Monday evening. We're speaking today, one of my favourite writers, and this is great because it's obviously we've got the wonderful Matt Nicholson with me today. Now, people may know us or not, but I'm going to out myself here. But my surname is Nicholson, and it was great when I met Matt a couple of years ago. It felt like the Nicholsons are in the house, and that always rules for me. So now, Matt is a fantastic writer. He's currently just put his fourth book out, so we'll talk about that primarily today. And Matt is from the outskirts of Hull. So obviously, Matt, how have you been keeping, mate, since the last time we spoke?
Well, I've been surviving. I think that's about the best any of us can manage, isn't it? But I've been very lucky. It hasn't affected me too much, other than keeping me indoors. But I'm glad to be out again now, though.
Oh yeah, completely. Same for me. Like, because I know, obviously, like you've got your own health issues, like I have, and it impacted us both over the lockdown period in different ways. Did you and your wife manage to avoid getting COVID altogether? Did you over that period?
So far, touch wood, yes. I mean, you never know whether you've had it without being tested, but as far as we know, we haven't explicitly had the virus. No.
Oh, good for you, Matt. We got it on Christmas Eve. Actually, we did last year. I know we'd gone over to go and see my wife's family, and then it was a case of like we got it on the Christmas Eve. Been over to see Mum, then we went over for a bite to eat in the evening, and then on Boxing Day I got the symptoms, so we had to basically get a lift back home. So got back home, whatever means we could, basically. And that wasn't a pleasurable experience.
No, I'm sure.
That's for sure, mate. But hey ho, it is what it is of it. Now, obviously, we're here today, like I said, to talk primarily about your new book, Untanglement. And I'm guessing, first of all, this book was wrote over the lockdown period for you, really, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, pretty much so. I started putting poems together after my last book, and the lockdown just focused me on that, really. It was on the back of finishing a period of therapy as well, so there was quite a lot of ideas and stuff buzzing about as a result of that too. So the book kind of started to happen as I started to untangle my brain. The poems started to come out a bit.
Yeah, I think lockdown for a lot of us really is forced quite a few poets out to be much more reflective, aren't they? So, and this book yours is certainly a very, very, very reflective book. And I said to you, Mike, I've definitely read at least one of your books. Well, I think it was the first one, and I found this was a really quite direct book. It was, and was it that planned that way when you first started writing it, or did it just come out that way?
I took part in a lot of online workshops and sort of classes and stuff during the lockdown. And I found that, as I say, on the back of the therapy, interacting with all the other poets in those workshops sort of brought out a much more honest, direct version of what I was doing. I'd had to be honest with myself during that process. So I started to share them, and I got used to the process of having feedback from other writers without sort of cowering in fear for what they might say next. So as a result, I think I started to develop a kind of directness and honesty that I've always craved for, but never quite found as much as I have in this book. So.
Oh, excellent, mate. Yeah, I think going to really good workshops like over the lockdown, like as you used to. I've been to a number of online workshops myself over that period, and I was at home for the 6 months. I was basically not in work, and it was like, yeah, it did something unusual to me as well. And I know my wife Amanda, she did quite a few novel ones in that period as well, and it's like, I think it did something to people, didn't it? And it's like we both said before that we both know writers that they just stopped on a lot and haven't recovered from it. But in other cases, it's forced a reflection. And your book, I think, is really like that. Actually, it is.
Well, I think I did one constant workshop throughout the whole last couple of years with Mark Connors and Jill Lambert, who you know. And that was brilliant because it became a lifeline, because a lot of the people who were interacting on those workshops were either housebound or locked in, or whatever the phrases we're allowed to use for the pandemic are. And we came to depend on each other. So it brought out a different kind of camaraderie, almost a different relationship. So we were able to, or had to be more honest, because we weren't going to put up with any more nonsense from each other. We wanted to, help each other through. So it was good.
Same for me as well. So I've learned a lot from that myself. And I made some new friends off that myself, people I hadn't necessarily known before. And it's done strange things to people straight away. So now, obviously, onto the book now. Obviously, we better talk about it. So otherwise, we're skating around the ideas all the time, and people are noticing there. Mark shot us. Mark. Now I'm trying to Mark in a couple of weeks. Matt's sort of showing us the book off there. If you listen just the audio version of this, now obviously, tell us about where the title Untanglement came from, first of all, then.
Well, it's an odd one because I had a different title in mind, and nobody else liked it apart from me. And I sort of stuck to it as long as I could, but eventually it got to the point where people were saying, okay, you can have it, but you really probably shouldn't. So I sat down and I went through it all and had that kind of same question that you asked at the start of how did you come about these poems? And it really is just the untanglement of my head after 50 years on the planet, getting help with stuff and dealing with stuff and being more straightforward, getting all the tangles out of your head. So
it's almost like getting the cobwebs out, really, because I said people may know, like me and you were very, very close in age. I think you were about 3 weeks older than me or something. It's around that territory.
Like that.
I remember when we first met a couple of years ago. So I know I've just turned 50, and I think you were a couple of weeks before me. It was very close anyway. So that's why I kind of clicked to you straight away. I remember us meeting a couple of years ago on that. I think you do, when you get to a certain stage as a writer, it's time to, feels like the real work's now beginning. Yeah. And I get the feeling from reading this book, that's what you felt in this book yourself, actually, straight away.
It feels like a new stage, definitely. It feels like, I described it to somebody in a ridiculous, childish way of finishing a level of a computer game and just going up one, is how it felt. I'd learned a lot of skills along the way, and I'd done a lot of work, but now I was going to go out and fight the bigger monsters, and that's what some of these poems are.
Yeah, straight away with it. Now, I want to, before we go on the book, one quick question about this. How did this book compare to your other 3 books then? Because I know you said before, didn't you, felt like you might have got a bit too flowery in places in the past.
I think I was more abstract in the past because, in abstraction, I could hide a bit. I was talking about the same kind of things, but far more abstractly and not always connecting and not always getting that point across. So whilst I was, enjoying the poetry of it all, I don't think I was communicating in the same way that I am now. So hopefully that's the point of difference, that it's more available and it's more accessible to people without losing any of its impact.
Yeah, no, I agree with you straight away on that. Now, what I want to do today, obviously, and we've talked about this previously today, I want to talk about a number of specific poems in this book. Yeah. Not necessarily the best poems, but the ones I wanted to pick a selection out. But before we get onto that, I did notice before that quite a number of poems in the book all start off in the titles with "said." Now, there was clearly a meaning behind that. Okay, what I know about you by now, Matt, that wouldn't have been an accident. So, so tell us about that. Why? What made you do that?
There's about 8 or 9, maybe 10. I don't know.
I think there was nine, but I'm probably told wrong.
And the idea was that the first poem in the book is called "Said Big Me to Little Me," and it's a conversation between myself as an adult and myself as a child. When I was having open heart surgery. So it's quite a sort of forceful opening poem.
Very
but I
forceful,
like the idea of it, of a poem being something that's reported to somebody. So said a concerned neighbour, or said one person to another, sort of thing. As if it was a thread that ran through that you could sort of hang the rest of the poems on. I don't think I'm getting that across very clearly, but it started off with 3 or 4, and then a lot of the other titles were changed to fit in with that, to give it sort of spine through the middle of the book of poems that were conversations, as it were.
Yeah, again, I get you completely about that. No, it does make sense. Now, the first piece I want to talk about today actually is the second piece in the book. Spontaneous Forecast, which I think is a great title anyway, straight away. And obviously this is probably because we're of the same age, and I love the nostalgia that came up in the second stanza. But tell us about that then. Why the title's really weird, like Spontaneous Forecast. So tell us about that first of all.
Well, this was a poem that was written specifically to be the second poem in the book. It wasn't a poem that was then added in or mixed about. I had that first poem about that really dark, traumatic moment in my childhood on the operating theatre, and I wanted a positive, happy, spontaneous child. Some trauma in my childhood. Most of my childhood, I was extremely lucky. I was extremely happy, and it was very positive. So that's really what I wanted to create with that second poem, and that sort of feeling of spontaneity that you get as a child. When you wake up on one of those summer mornings and you've got to do something, and you know that your mates are going to be out and you're going to be doing something daft all day long, and it's going to be a great lark. That was what I was trying to capture with that title. And as a child, you're always looking forward. So that was the forecast. So it was just to try and capture that childish feeling on a summer morning as a direct contrast with the first poem about such dark things.
You succeeded really well with it as well. I love the line imagery. This is a general comment. I love dot dash clouds. I thought, what an image. And but that followed quite nice with the contrast in the second stanza when you went on about Monster Munch and bottles of pop. So what was your favourite Monster Munch then?
I think I was a beef Monster Munch.
Oh yeah, same here.
Love the yellow packet.
Yeah.
I think that's it. I mean, the pickled onion ones were too strong for me.
They were for me as well. I remember getting them when I was, like I said, when I was coming up in primary school myself with them. And my mum used to hate me. She'd tell me off, saying, "You're not one of those pickled onion ones again at the corner shop again." Oh yeah, great choice that, mate. Now, the second piece I want to talk about is close to the actual title of the book. Obviously not Untanglement. You've done Untangle, and I can see why you've done this. So I want to know a bit more about this piece and what made you. If you look at the book, you've got a fairly consistent rhythm pattern on the first 5 stanzas, but then it seems to break off in a different direction on 6 and 7. So tell us about that decision then for that piece.
Well, it was a poem it was very much an observational poem. And my wife had a box of embroidery thread delivered during the lockdown. She does, while she's watching the box sets on the telly, she does her sewing and stuff just to keep her hands moving and her brain working, I think. And she just basically opened this box and devoured it. It was like putting a kitten in amongst a bag of wool. It was just everywhere, she loved it. And it was a really enthusiastic and positive moment again in the horror of lockdown. And she started off very rhythmically, unwinding these threads and then winding them back around a different shaped card so they would fit in her case that she has. And I watched her do it in this rhythm. And then at the end, when it breaks rhythm, I just said, "What on earth are you doing?" And she explained why. So that's why it just suddenly comes in as speech at the end.
Yeah,
because I just was watching transfixed for hours.
Yeah, I could see it with that straight away. It's like Amanda's like that sometimes. When she often plays Candy Crush, and like it does something very similar. I think it's a similar effect when you're watching TV sometimes. And if she's doing well, she starts jumping up and down a bit sometimes. Yeah, I can see it. It's the way you observe people when you're living with them, like you said. I got it straight away.
It's a love poem, really. It's a love poem, really, in the sense that I was obsessed with watching her do this thing. When I've read it out loud in public, I've made sure people know it's about her. So I think it's the most.
Otherwise, you're getting divorced.
In the book. Yeah.
If you don't mention that, you'll be getting divorced pretty quick, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Then the next ones I'm flicking through this live on my Kindle as we speak, and obviously this one is in a different direction of the third piece, which is the first one, said in the mother's tongue. Now, I love the first line in this piece, probably because I'm partially sighted anyway. So it's like I felt it was a different tone in the book, this one. So I wanted to talk about this one because I noticed on it, he started off with, people look at the book, "I'm going blind willfully." Then a few lines later, "I'm going blind on purpose." And "I'm going blind by choice." And they all seem to be really quite powerful when you use that.
I was really trying to write about the mother's tongue is Mother Earth. I mean, it's not a particularly dense image. It's just Mother Earth.
Yeah, I guessed it was.
At her wit's end. I can't deal with all your denial and your ignoring what you're doing to the planet. So it was just a way of Mother Earth spiting the rest of us by deliberately going blind, so she could really focus on the things that were so horrible. About the way the climate and the environment and all that sort of thing is going. I'm not really a sort of issues poet. I don't tend to write about straightforward politics or such things. But I think if you ignore the state of the planet at the moment, it won't be long before we're all paddling in our front gardens,
Yeah, no, I think so. Doing it, as I told Amanda, Hawaii 5-0 impressions, definitely.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I agree with this. Yeah, definitely on the sofa. Yeah, that's why I wanted to talk about piece. I kind of guessed it was about Mother Earth, and I thought it was a bit of a change in tone that for the book it was. And I thought it was a really good piece. And then, just a couple of pages later, talking about you don't really like politics, and then you went straight for it.
Well, yeah.
So the next one, obviously, is I met him at a counter demonstration, which is the longest piece I wanted to ask you about today. So this felt like it was something a bit more, as you said, a bit more direct. But tell us about the story behind this. It clearly there's something going on in this piece.
I wanted to try and write some narrative poems. I wanted to tell some stories that were available as stories without too much poetry over the top, if you know what I mean. So I wanted to write this. Years and years ago, I went to a demonstration and I marched. I can't remember what we were marching against. It's one of those things from my past. Yeah, I'm sure it was important at the time. And there was a guy walking next to me who told me during the day as we walked along protesting that he was, of no fixed abode. And he called himself a doorway dweller. And I just wanted to try and bring that story to the book, because I thought, the notion of walking around and demonstrating is all very well for the people who are privileged enough to be able to go home and sleep at night in a warm bed. But to actually have somebody stood next to me whose life was a damn sight harder than mine, and marching with me, and I wish I could remember what the march was about, but it was probably something simple and something that was basically wrong. But he had just as much time and energy to spend shouting about what was wrong, even though his own life you know, was getting a kicking from the world as well. So
Yeah, no, it made me think of when I was reading that piece there, certainly. Like as over lockdown, and I kind of met somebody just for lockdown. I'm not saying I knew somebody briefly that was diabetic like me, that was on insulin, and he was homeless. So basically, I remember it made me think of that one really. Then it did, because you think when you're on insulin, when you're diabetic and you're homeless, because the insulin has to be frozen or kept chilled all the time. So you had a pig of a job trying to keep an eye on that. He did. I remember you got a church minister to look after the injections room. Could have seen one today, but it's like you do his stories like that. You don't think until you see people, you don't realise how bad the situation can be for people like that. So,
and yet they still have good in them, and they're still doing positive things, and they're still trying to make their voice heard.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. It's interesting. I think sometimes you find people. That's what I thought of this piece was, like, you don't know how far people can go to hit rock bottom, and they're still doing good things on it. And that's why I thought of that piece there. Now, this is in contrast to the next piece I'm going to ask you about, which is where this one caught me out, this piece. I wanted to ask you about this, which is one of the shorter pieces in the book. A cricket field on a Yorkshire wold, is that right?
Yeah, wold, yeah.
Yeah.
This was one of the first poems that was written for this book. It was written for an anthology originally for the Yorkshire, the High Wolds Poetry Festival. And the High Wolds basically are the bit between East Yorkshire and the North Yorkshire moors. So it's it's the sort of gently rolling stuff before you get to the really impressive Yorkshire moors. And it's one of my favourite parts of the world. It has a lot of gentle beauty about it, and the idea of being on a cricket field in the Yorkshire Wolds, having a walk in the sunshine is a wonderful feeling. And then the notion of it suddenly starting to rain, I've sort of got this idea that we're all the same at some point, at some level. So it didn't matter who was walking in that field that day. As soon as it started to raining, we were all united by the same feeling of wanting the sun to come back. And I think that was part of how I felt about the lockdown and stuff. You know, those early days of the lockdown when people were united against this unknown evil before we all started remembering that we weren't supposed to be friends with each other. You know, there was a time when it brought us all together, and it brought out the sort of commonality that we all have with one another. We've all got the same lives to lead in some way. So that's what that poem is really about, is somewhere beautiful, suddenly soaking wet, but, you know, still trying to find the goodness in it.
Yeah, it's only a very short piece. People will read it. Like I said, and I love the fact where you had the word together straight in the middle of it. And it's like, it's two short 4-line stanzas and the word together in splitting it. And I thought that was a really quite telling point to me straight away with that it was. So I like there's two stanzas separate from each other, the words together. Almost that brings it all together for me there. In the middle of the poem, not the end.
Ends one and starts the next.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
That's what I got straight down to. It was probably my favourite piece in the book, to be honest with you, that one it was. So.
Oh, good. That's nice.
That's why. So, but right, so we're going to come on to lastly, one of the not the last poem in the book, one of the later ones, and this is the most longest title of the ones I'm going to ask you about. Anyway, even though it's not the longest piece, and it's looking for your reflection in every kind of winter. Now, obviously, this one was. I'm guessing, was this on Christmas Day? This piece was it?
No, it's every kind of water, not winter.
Water? Oh my God! Yes, apologies, I read it wrong.
No, it's a poem about grief, really. I mean, towards the end of the book is probably where most of the poems about dealing with grief are, because dealing with grief has got to be about hope as well as the upset. Otherwise, we just wouldn't be able to carry on. So, whilst this isn't the most hopeful of the grief poems, it is in amongst some others that have some positivity and hope in them. And it's a poem really about never completely getting over grief. It's always with you, and the looking for your reflection in every kind of water is just often when you see yourself reflected back off a pond or a window or whatever it is. you get that feeling that there might be somebody else with you. You might sort of daydream about the person that you've missed, or that's left or gone.
I agree. Because you think when you get where people know something, like I said, when you get into your 50s, like both me and you are now, you are going to start losing people that you know one way or another.
Yeah.
And I always look at things like, I'm sure you agree with this, like they're always going to be there with you. I think in one way or another, and that's why I wanted to talk about this poem definitely with that. So
yeah, I mean, it's really just we lost a daughter 20 years ago, and I've only just really been able to start writing about it in the last few years, and it's those moments that occur when you can't do anything but think about them. So you just have to learn to live with those moments and how you deal with them. So to try and find some beauty and some positive thoughts in those moments is hard, but it's almost essential to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think you have to. And then if everything you do in life, and I always am a believer in, my writing a similar direction where it always carries on. And it takes you to the next stage of life. And I think if you stand still as a writer, that's when the problems begin. And that's why this has been a great book for you, Matt, because I think it's really shown to me. I don't know, obviously, where you would go next year writing. You could tell us that in a moment. But yeah, I think it opens other doors up for you, if that makes sense straight away, doesn't it? So definitely.
Yeah, I hope so.
Now, obviously, I always like to ask people, first of all, what they've got coming up next. But before we do that, I know you've had a launch recently as well. And I know you had a support from one of my favourite poets, actually, living poets, Helen Mort. Now, you were telling me off camera before that. How did you meet Helen in the first place?
Well, I met Helen originally through a firm of poets who used to knock about in Wakefield and Leeds, Matt Abbott and
John Darwin was one, wasn't he? So I know John.
Yeah, and Genevieve Walsh and all those people. But Helen Mort came to Hull with them on one occasion, and she pronounced a word. She did a poem about Hull and the trawlermen, and Lillian Balocca, who was the woman who protested for the rights of trawlermen safety and stuff. And Helen pronounced the word, the place Hessel as Hessel. And I knew that I shouldn't say anything, but I had to tell her that she got it wrong. So I marched up as a poet who'd never been on a stage before and said, "Excuse me, Helen Mort, you've pronounced it wrong." And so I've kind of made a contact with her then, and then every now and again I've bumped into her along the way. And then in the last sort of 2 or 3 years, we've done, she's helped me out with writing some of this book, actually. She's been an extremely generous mentor along the way. So, yeah. Along with Mark Connors and Jill Lambert, the three of them have really been there to support me along the way.
Oh, good stuff, mate. Good stuff. Like, people are wondering about Helen Mort. I'm familiar with her first book, Division Street, which is one of my favourite poetry books. You told me before our third book's out soon. I've got the second one. I'm not as familiar with the second one, I'll be honest. But I do love Division Street, definitely. And I look forward to chatting to Mark and Jill in a few weeks' time for Spoken Label. So now, obviously, Mark, I've got you Mark now because I said Matt. I can tell them. I'm not very good at changing names of people. I get mixed up. But okay, Matt. What plans do you have next then? Have you got any sort of creativity projects on the go?
Yeah, I'm going back to something with some of the Hull poets that I've known for a while. Where we've got a sort of performance group which has gone before by the name of Gob Almighty. Which includes Peter Naggs, Mike Watts, Dean Wilson, and Jim Hygo, which are 4 big names in terms of Hull poetry, and we're hopefully going to book some gigs in the next few weeks to do in August and September, with a view to trying to.
Well, good luck, mate. Definitely with that. So fingers crossed. So, have you got any ideas for your 5th book yet? Possibly brewing or.
I've no idea at this moment in time. Every other one has been every 2 years. All the previous 4 have been split by 2 years, but I think this one might be a bit longer till the next one comes.
Well, my philosophy is it'll arrive when it arrives, doesn't it? So
yeah,
naturally.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, if people want to get hold of a copy of this book and find out more about you, where are they best going to conclude with?
The best place to go is my website, which is, and I'm going to do the advert now, is www.mattpoet.com. So it's MATT poet, POET.com. And books are for sale on there. There's videos on there. There's all kinds of bits and pieces. Come and have a look, really.
Yeah, it's a great website. Well worth your time, guys. So we'll wrap up this part one now, because we're trying to get time to get Matt to go all 6 of these pieces in the second half. So this might be a bit of a mad gallop here, but it's been great, mate. Thank you, mate. So let's just see you all been well. As I always say, 2 shakes of the dice. See you in a minute.
Spoken, mate.
Hi, guys. Yes, still here with the wonderful Matt. My time to shut up now and let Matt read all 6 of these pieces he did for us, talked about calendar before. Over to you, mate.
Thank you. This first one is the poem Spontaneous Forecast, and this is a poem about childhood. Awake at sparrow fart, windows open wide, sky filled to the brim with a missing shade of blue, lined with dot-dash clouds enough to take the edge off. Wilco will be there, and Aid and Manky Bob, with bags of Monster Munch and bottles of pop. We'll swing out in the unspoilt air on the new rope over the beck.
Excellent start, that. I should have asked you before, what was your favourite pop as a child?
I'm a dandelion and burdock kind of person.
Yeah. I was them myself, yeah. Tremendous stuff, yeah. So definitely that one. Then we used to drink a lot of Iron Brew back in those days as well. So
oh, blimey.
Yeah, I'm going back now. So anyway, mate, let's get you moving straight, mate. On to number 2, mate.
Okay, this next one's called Untangle, and as I say, it was about watching my wife open a box of embroidery threads that was delivered during the lockdown. The woman I love is thrilled by this arrival, this box as big as the one memories fill. It's a third full of threads spitting out colours. She wolfs down her tea, begins her intricate mime. Each skein she transfers to the sofa looks orange. Her fingers deft unwind lime green to the floor. From the bag in her lap she pulls a white cut-out card. By some sleight of hand winds the fastened red line. The fat-wound bobbin finds its place in her case. Sure that it's home, she makes the same moves again. Wider threads come in skeins, not a box of fat bobbins. Because winding the threads, the best bit by far.
Oh, I've got to say, Matt, with that one, it's even more tender hearing you read that in person, and actually, it's really quite heartfelt on the page, but sometimes it shows when you read a poem out how different tone it brings in when you're reading it. And that's beautiful, truly beautiful, mate. So,
thank you.
On to number 3 then.
So, this is, as I say, an environmental poem. And the mother's tongue that is referred to is Mother Earth. So this is said in a mother's tongue. I'm going blind willfully to avoid seeing the colours bleed out. The edges blur and blunt and soften, gold too often exchanged for darkness. I'm going blind on purpose. No eyes will ever see anything as beautiful as the girl by the river naming flies on a seagull's corpse. I'm going blind by choice. I want a sense of smell turned to 11, so I might inhale the end of days and detect every atom of humanity on my soft mucous membranes, and in my throat like tea leaves, on my epiglottis, as the same dust the watchman cleans with a brush from the workings of the timepiece.
Excellent. Oh, wow. Beautiful stuff, mate. Yeah. I love when you did it live then, mentioned about the repetition bit. It seemed to give a bit more punch as well, that actually it did live as well. So
I do like to write as if I'm reading out loud.
You can say
make sure that they were,
It definitely is it's an oral poem as well as a page one. That is it's a good balance, that way. So okay. Right, on to from the subtle protest to direct protest now. So.
Yeah. Well, this is a story that's based largely on an encounter I had with a guy of no fixed abode at a demonstration. This is one of those poems where the title goes straight into the first verse. I met him at a counter demonstration. as the police corralled us in an alley 2 streets away from where the plastic fascists marched in unruly columns, making no sense and doing so loudly. He caught me catching his eye, because he looked the very spit of a lad I'd been to school with. I looked away, but he came over in his odd brown suit and parka, his frayed black Converse boots. Sharing my cheese and pickle, we talked for hours that day. Between the chants and protest songs, he showed me photos of his boy and the wife who's cut all ties. As the hours dragged on, he seemed to come alive. Could be worse, he said, as I sat on the tarmac soothing my feet. Could be bombing our villages, like in Syria or Sarajevo. He laughed as I swallowed my reply, offered me a hand to stand, and when the police let us move, I asked if he needed a lift. He said, I don't have far to go. And when I turned to say goodbye to make some joke about being kettled, he was lifting cardboard in a doorway, making sure his sleeping bag was dry.
It's got such a good last line, that one, Matt. It really has. Like, it was like, I think he really brought home the power of that last line, saying like about a sleeping bag, making sure his sleeping bag was dry. Yeah, it's brilliant stuff, mate. Absolutely powerful, mate. Okay, now we're on to something completely different now, to quote Monty Python.
Yeah, this is one of the first poems that was written for the book, and it's just about how we're all the same despite being different, really. It's called A Cricket Field on a Yorkshire Wold. We might stand like unbaled stumps in a line in a May deluge in the mid-afternoon of things. Together, we might expect a slant return of sun, and in expectation renew all that is common. Yeah.
Oh, it's typical that then. I was just thinking, the stanzas they're going for. Then he stopped about, no, he hasn't.
It really is that short, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I think sometimes it's easy to get enraptured with words sometimes. That's why I lost my train of thought for 2 seconds. Anyway, mate, fantastic. Okay, I'd said before, probably my favourite piece in the book, that. So, okay, we're on to the last piece now already, somehow.
Yeah. Well, they are quite short, but they're, I don't have a very long attention span, so that's why I have to write short stuff. This last one is a poem about grief and how grief is always with you, but it doesn't always have to be something that overpowers you. It can be something that you can win against in the end. This is called Looking for Your Reflection in Every Kind of Water. I will go back to my river on Christmas Day, when the drumming of the factories beats sparse retreat with no other sound against the shore. And I will stand on the seawall at Easter, looking down through the spray and chemicals to where the sand, the stones and children play beneath writhing brine black moshing waves. And I will know to stand still against the wall beside the dribbling fountain in the middle of town, where mismatched Valentine souls chew tongues and kid themselves on something lives for them here. And I will stand beside the beefstock boil of the mighty wharf, where it washes prints from stolen stones, sends the culprits eastward. And I will throw mushroom caps at the seabirds who invade so far inland on their mission to steal our breath. Thank you.
Fantastic, mate. Definitely well worth a round of applause out there. Brilliant stuff, mate. Been tremendous, mate. Definitely has. It's been great to catch up with you today. Like I said, it's sometimes a common myth when you get people on spoken label. It's like I get them on once, I never speak to them again. In your case, I wanted to get you back on again, and it's been a great time to get you on today, mate. So
thanks. It's much appreciated, mate.
Well, I'd love to have you on again in the future, mate. And who knows, I may get a chance to watch you actually read in person some point down the line.
Yes.
That's why I've been tremendous, mate. So hang around anyway, Matt. I do need a quick chat to you off microphone anyway. So
okay.
It's been a pleasure, mate. Hopefully it will be 3 years before we see you on air again, mate. Definitely.
Thank you.
Right, guys and girls. As Don Callis, formerly of Impact Wrestling, says, stay safe and stay on.
Spoken, mate.